Welcome to Girls in Finance, the podcast where we share insights into the financial industry from experienced professionals. Today we have a very special guest, Erica. To start us off, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name's Erica Goode. I'm a certified public accountant. I run what I call a boutique accounting firm, virtually based. I'm physically based in Idaho, but all of my clients are virtual, and I help them with accounting, bookkeeping, and fractional CFO needs.
If you wouldn't mind, could you please share your experience at Walgreens? As I feel like that's a very unique and interesting experience that you have had.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go back a little further just to give everybody the context. When I left college, I first started out at Big Four public accounting. I worked at KPMG. I spent about 2.5 years there. And then from there, I went into corporate accounting and later corporate finance over at Walgreens and spent the rest of what I call my corporate career there and then transitioned into starting my own firm later. But at Walgreens specifically, I was in corporate accounting to begin with, doing specifically fixed assets accounting, and then later transitioned into what I will say is my love of finance in a financial planning and analysis role, and really spent the rest of my time at Walgreens under the finance umbrella versus the accounting umbrella. And I spent most of my time was around FP&A, as they call it, but financial planning and analysis, which was a lot of forecasting and a lot of budgeting. And I will say that was and still is just my favorite piece of the finance profession pie, and really enjoyed my time and learned a lot being in corporate finance at such a high level, such a huge company. Learned so much in FP&A and forecasting and budgeting that served me clearly through now.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask like a quick question to build off.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on what FP&A is for those who
Yeah.
don't know?
Well, at least this is how I understand it. Back when we called it FP&A in my corporate days. So if the industry's always moving fast, but for me, FP&A is building a budget for really a company. Like everybody needs a budget, even $2 billion companies. And you would build a budget, and then as the year goes on, you're continuing to reforecast. So your budget is locked in time at the beginning of the year. And so if you're a company, you're going to say, okay, my revenue budget is, we'll say $2 million for a year, and I'm going to plan to spend $1.5 million. And so we're going to make half a million dollars of profit. And really the FP&A's role is somebody likely is giving you that number from like the CEO seat or the business owner seat, and they're saying, this is what we plan to do. And the finance person comes in and says, okay, how does that spread out in every single month of the year? And how does that spread out on the profit and loss statement, the P&L? Like, well, we're going to spend this much on cost of goods sold. We're going to spend this much on salary. We're going to spend this much on just software. And our job as a finance person is to say, okay, CEO, you have this vision, which their job is to have vision. And our job is to come in and say, that's fantastic. How does this lay out financially? And is it realistic? Because if we can come back and say, okay, if you want to make this amount of profit happen, and it's going to take XYZ of revenue and expenses. Is that realistic? Is that what you operationally plan to do? Is that budget correct? And especially in a big corporate role like that, you're going back and forth with what we would call the business owners. Even though it's this big Walgreens company, there's all these quote business owners within the company. And you're constantly in conversation with them, like, well, my numbers are showing this when I build out what you tell me to. Does that make sense from you operationally for what your stores or your salespeople or whatever it may be has to do? And they may come back and say, yep, that sounds right. Or they may come back and say, wow, that seems really aggressive. I'm not sure if operationally that's something that's realistic. And it starts this really good conversation of like, okay, well, then what is realistic and what does the forecast look like for that? And so at the beginning of the year, you're locking in that budget. And then as every month goes on, you're constantly updating your forecast. Your budget always stays the same. And you're always kind of comparing back to what you thought was going to happen at the beginning of the year. But every month that goes by, you're like, well, revenue didn't come in like we thought it did in January, it came in slightly lower. Does that change how we forecast for the rest of the year? Or maybe it came in slightly higher. Does that change what we think for the rest of the year? And you're just constantly updating that forecast and then comparing it back to the original budget. So that's the forecasting budget piece of FP&A. And then the A of that is analysis. And so that can be really broad. Um, that could just mean a lot of different things for any company. For me specifically, and for a company like Walgreens, there was one time when I held the role as FP&A of marketing at Walgreens. And so the quote A, the analysis of marketing was, okay, we're going to run this TV ad and it's going to cost us $20 million to run this TV ad. Now, it's our job as a finance person to say, what do we think that $20 million is going to get us? Is it going to get us X amount of more revenue? And how much will that translate into profit? And then we get to help decide, like, is that a smart use of $20 million? And that's the analysis piece. Sometimes you do that beforehand, sometimes you do that after the fact. If you can prove out, you know, we sent a mailer to all of the 60-year-olds in one location and one geographic, maybe all of Illinois, we sent 60-year-olds mailers to go get their flu shot. Well, did more 60-year-olds get flu shots in Illinois that year than they did last year? Well, then maybe that mailer was a really good use of marketing spend. If they didn't, maybe it wasn't. And that's where finance gets to come in and what I think is solve these really fun math problems. And they're not, sometimes we think, oh, I'm not good at math. I can't be in accounting or finance because I didn't take AP Calc BC. Is that still a thing?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So sometimes we're like, well, I don't take the fanciest, hardest math class and I can't be in finance. All of that finance is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And that's what I tell people. If you are good at Algebra 1, you can do accounting and finance.
So I feel like talking about corporate finance, could you share about some of the pros and cons working in the field?
Yeah, so I think at a corporate level, working like the pro is you learn so much. I think when you get into a big company, there is so much opportunity for different roles and to see different areas of the company, whether it be a business unit, which is an area of the company that it's almost like a sub business in the business. So, like at Walgreens, for example, and this is so good. I think everybody listening probably has a Walgreens in their neighborhood. And so, when you think of a business unit of Walgreens, one of the business units is the pharmacy behind at the back of the store. And that actually generates 80% of the revenue in the store, which is funny because 80% of the store is actually made up of all the greeting cards and the makeup and the Tylenols and the potato chips and all of that front end stuff, we call it front end, is a different business unit. And so when you have a big company, whether it be Walgreens or even something way smaller, you just have the opportunity to move around in a company, to see many different parts of a business and just gain your experience. And I think big companies are fabulous for it. They have more exposure, they have more opportunity to see different things. On the downside, on the con of a big corporate finance organization, is it is a big corporate finance organization. I don't know if you girls go to big high schools. I know one of you does because I know what high school you go
Oh,
to.
yeah.
But like the bigger the school, the more drama, the more things there are, the more rules there are. There's just more complications in that. And that's the same thing as like with a big company and a big corporate finance organization, is there's going to be a lot more rules and boundaries and people telling you what to do and people pointing in different directions. And so that has its downsides. I think it could mean more hours, more working hours. I think it can mean just having exposure to different people that sometimes relationships aren't so great. And you can have great people you work with, and you can have really cruddy people you work with. And that's the name of the game when you're out in any workplace. And I just think the bigger the company, the harder it is to avoid all of that. So there's definitely, I mean, I would say from a resume builder perspective, corporate finance is fantastic, and you can for sure spend your entire career there, or you can take the experience and do something different with it. It's never a wasted experience to go somewhere, see something, and then move on to a different role.
I see. I was just curious about what your day in the life looked like when you were working in corporate finance and how you would compare that to like what your day in the life looks like now owning your own practice.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say my day, this is going to be very, very specific. My day at corporate finance, and I was working there up until I had two kids. And it was waking up at 6 in the morning and being on the road at 7 to drive the kids to daycare, which was thankfully actually on site at my company. So we would all drive to my work together. I'd drop them off. I'd have to be in my office by 8 a.m. and it would be go, go, go until 4:30, and I was probably the first person to leave at 4:30 because I had to get my two kids home so we could eat dinner, so we could be in bed on time at 7 p.m. Because I don't know if you know us accountants, we like to stick to a schedule and we like plan and we like some rules and boundaries. And so that was, at a big level, it was an intense day. It was lots of meetings. It was a lot of bosses. Like there's just a lot of people with a lot of agendas and things to get done. And at a corporate environment, you are their whim. You are almost never the top boss because unless you're the CEO of a large company, there is somebody above you telling you what to do. And that can be intense and that can you don't get to make your own schedule sometimes. Um, Again, it's really good exposure, but that's what the day in the life of a corporate employee looks like versus what I do now. I honestly work 15 hours a week because that's what I choose to work because I still have those two kids around and they need help when there's not school. And so I've really dedicated myself to not work when they're not when they're at I've dedicated myself to not work when they're not at school. And so my work days revolve around their school days. And I like it that way because I want to be the one who picks them up from the bus and I want to be the one who helps them with their homework. And that's just a value that's important to me at this point in my life. I think there are lots of different ways to have kids and a job. But for me, that is just the way I want to do it in our family. And so I build my schedule around 15 hours a week. And that means I get to decide how many clients I take on, how much I charge them. I don't have a boss other than my clients, right? We're always reporting to somebody. I'm reporting to my clients. But it's really just something I've built from the ground up, really intentionally to fit our family lifestyle at this season of life we're in.
Yeah, I feel like I really like the idea of these like 15-hour work weeks, and especially during like this generation, I feel like a lot of people are moving on from the hustle work like culture and from to like a more simple, relaxed lifestyle. Do you think that this 15-hour like work style would be more implemented in the future, specifically in the financial industry?
Yeah, I think we are a slow industry to change. I think, I'll be honest, I think all of American workforce is built on this is not better or worse, this is just history. It is built on the backs of men with stay-at-home wives who took care of the children. And that is just how culture is. That's not a judgment. This is just history. And and the culture was built on that. And so what has wonderfully happened is these amazing, intelligent women have entered the workforce in all industries. And what I see has happened is the culture, don't know what to do with them. We're like, great, just act like a man and everything will be fine because now we're equals. You just work the 40 hours a week and everything will be fine. Now we're all equal. But who- but we haven't adjusted to the fact, well, who is watching the children? And we try to manipulate that with childcare and all these wonderful people who take care of our children when we're at work. But really, maybe the solution isn't making everybody look the same as history is implemented. Maybe it's the culture has to adjust because there are dads who don't want to work 40 hours. And I have friends where both of the married couple want to work 30 hours a week, or they both want to work 20 hours a week. They want to have a full-time salary between the two of them, but not just one of them. And I think there's slowly going to be this idea, especially as older generations retire from every industry. There's going to be new thought processes and new ideas coming into work culture. And I think it's exciting to see people talk about this because it might not happen overnight. It might not even happen early in your work generation, but I think slowly things will change. And I think that's really exciting to think about.
Yeah, I hope so because finance is all like seen as this notorious like, working lifestyle with like maximum amount of work hours and everything.
Yeah. And I think it's a really great, Big Four public accounting, corporate jobs, investment banking, they all get a bad rap, right? Everybody knows that the lifestyle coming out of college in those roles is not the greatest. Um, for better or worse, you get a lot of experience that is really, really important. That once, if you're willing to go get that experience and you have that on your resume, you can do so much with it after that. You could build your own business. You could start your own company and make 15-hour work weeks for everybody, right? How great would that be if you were the person who implemented that for a business because you've taken all this college knowledge and then industry knowledge and used it to build something that nobody's built yet. Like, you have that opportunity.
I see. I think that's something that both Tomby and I want to explore in the future, although the hours will be tough. I know a couple of like friends of mine who are also like summer analysts at like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and they're like, my summer's gone. But they're having a interesting time, they said. But I was wondering, is this also why you kind of decide to start your own CPA accounting firm with like your I guess shift in values towards more family?
Yeah, it actually absolutely is. When so I went through a period of burnout in, let me think, it was 2012. So we're talking 8 years ago. I hit burnout. Burnout does not feel good. It is a real thing. It's not a catchphrase. It is a physical health thing that affects you. And it looks like bad bad physical health, it looks like bad mental health, it looks like depression, it looks like anxiety, and it is something that really affects people. And I unfortunately went through that. I'll say I fortunately went through that because it really made me address what was important in my life, what I wanted to do with my career, and what I didn't want to do with my career in that time. And after I went through that, it took me a few years. I stayed at Walgreens for a number of years after that, but and things got better. I didn't live in burnout in 4 years. I made personal choices, changed my role, and um, got better while I was there. But ultimately, it really helped me realize that I can always come back to corporate finance. I know I'm a smart person. I can come back and get a corporate job when I want to, but I can't go back and make my kids little again. And I wanted to be the mom I wanted to be in that time period when they were little. And so ultimately, between my husband and I, we decided, with good savings on our personal side, with good financial decisions on our personal lives, I decided to leave the workforce. And I did not leave Walgreens and start my business. I left Walgreens and I did no work for 2 years. I was, quote, just a stay-at-home mom. Stay-at-home moms have a hard work job too. But for me, it was just what I wanted. It was what I needed. And I really enjoyed that time of just 2 years being only mom and not mom and director of finance. Um, and so that was just a really lovely time. And nearing the end of it, I desperately missed accounting. I missed the work. I didn't leave my career because I didn't like the work. It was just everything, personal, balancing all of the things. And I ultimately I missed doing work. I missed being in accounting and finance, and accidentally started an accounting firm from there because I asked one person if they needed help with their books and their small business and with their bookkeeping. And she immediately said yes. And I did not know she was going to immediately say yes. And I had never seen the inside of QuickBooks. when you think about a big company's not using QuickBooks. They're using really giant software called SAP or some other giant general ledger. And QuickBooks is for much smaller companies. And I had never seen that software, but that's what she needed. And so I immediately trained myself on QuickBooks and learned how to use it and started taking clients on there and just really slowly and intentionally built my firm to work around my kids' school schedule because I had hit that period of burnout. I was actually so afraid of going back to burnout and I was so afraid of making a wrong choice that I intentionally just built this business so slowly in a way that always worked for our family. And now here we are. I'll speak openly. It's because I talk about this on LinkedIn. It's a $200,000 firm. It is 15 hours a week. It's one employee, and it's a really wonderful business model that can sustain, your personal income and your life at the same time. And I'm just honestly so grateful and blessed that I've gotten to the point that I did. Also, in light of all of the rocks and hard places I've been in up until here.
Thank you so much for your input on this. And I guess wrapping this whole concept of the 15-hour work week, this would be particularly really beneficial for individuals who want to go to finance and accounting, but at the same time be able to create that personal time for themselves, especially for their hobbies or their families. Lastly, we're really grateful that we had the opportunity to interview you today. I learned a lot from you, and I'm sure our audience did as well.
I really enjoyed hearing about your experience, especially what you just shared. I think my parents, I also see like my parents in you, if that's like a saying, that they also like value that as well, and which, as from a child point of view, I am grateful for because I have family time other than tax season, which my parents cover. So that season was a little rough, but I I'm glad to say that that's also something that I hope to explore further when I get older. But at the same time, a little bit young, or we're young, so we might need to build our career first. So, yes.
And that's okay as long as you know it's an option. I didn't know this was an option when I was your age. I didn't know this was an option when I was 30 years old. So it's so great that you're spreading this message to other young women like yourselves that there are so many opportunities in accounting and finance, whether they be in corporate or entrepreneurship. Getting the education, know that you have so many opportunities available to you and you're never pigeonholed into one thing.
Awesome. I'll sure to keep that in mind. Thank you so much, Erica, for coming on today. We had a great time, and I'm sure our audience really appreciated your valuable insights.
Thank you so much for having me.